Very first thing that we're going to talk about today is that a gunman opened fire at a church once again in Michigan. This is not one, but two church shootings within Michigan just within the last 3 months. Now, if I was a pattern guy, if I was a recognition of patterns type of guy, I don't know if we categorize people that way, but if we did, and I was a recognition of patterns type of guy, I would say that seems like a pattern. Yeah. Now, this doesn't even get into school shootings, right? Because there's a weird theme going on here with these church shootings. One is that they're usually primarily, almost every one of these church shootings happens to be white men. Interesting. And this time, there's some shuffling of hands going on, at least my opinion, about the narrative and why this person might have done it. There's been some videos out there. We'll talk about those. Let me go ahead and pull up this article for you, and we can take a look at it together. So here we go. It says, a gunman opens fire at a Michigan church, and it sets it ablaze, killing at least 4 and wounding 8. What a tragedy, and this entire church just looks burnt to the ground. Horrible. So apparently what happened here, before I get into the story, is this guy took his car, drove it into the church, doused his car in gasoline, lit the car on fire, and then started randomly, I don't know if it was completely random, but shooting people within the church. Now, we'll see if we get more details. This came from this morning. I haven't read it yet because I was following as of last night, and now it is an article completed at 3 a.m. So this was in Grand Blanc, Michigan. An ex-Marine smashed a pickup truck into a church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, right, the LDS church, opened fire and set the building ablaze during a crowded Sunday service, and then was fatally shot by police. At least 4 people were killed and 8 wounded, and authorities were searching the building ruins for more victims. The attack occurred about 10:25 a.m. And by the way, I was literally sitting in church when this happened. And I will point out, not very far from the one that this happened in. Now, not a part of the LDS church, but nonetheless, hits very close to home, especially since this is the second one within the vicinity of me in this year. It's horrible. It's tragic. It's disgusting. It says the man got out of his pickup with 2 American flags raised in the truck bed and started shooting. I like how they add that. It is an interesting point, right? Police Chief William Rennie told reporters the attacker apparently used gas to start the fire and also had explosive devices, but it wasn't clear if he used them. Authorities identified the shooter as Thomas Jacob Sanford, 40 years old, of the neighboring small town of Burton. The FBI is leading the investigation and considered it an act of targeted violence. Yeah, said Reuben Coleman, the special agent in charge of the bureau. Officers responded to the 9/11 call where the church within 30 seconds. Wow, that's awesome. Renier, after the suspect left the church, 2 officers pursued him and engaged in gunfire, killing him about 8 minutes later. Wow, so he went in, did what he wanted to do, and then fled like a coward. People inside the church shielded children and moved them to safety during the attack. You want to say this isn't a spiritual war? You want to say that there's not a anti-Christian sentiment around the country and the world? How about we talk about the statistics? There has been four shootings at churches in 2025, and we're only in September. That is the most, I think, since 2017 or 2016. Now, an interesting theme that I saw there, an interesting pattern, is that the last time there was as many shootings in churches as there was today was within a year of Trump being elected back in 2016. Now, the same situation, the same pattern showing itself again. Trump is elected, and there is an increase of church shootings in the U.S. Not saying that those two things go hand in hand in any way. I just thought it was a interesting pattern. Now, what I also think is interesting is the word anti-Semitic. The word anti-Semitic is being thrown around so flippantly, so easily, without any valid reason, right? Now, that's not to say that there's not anti-Semitic people and that those people aren't terrible people, right? That's not to say that anybody who doesn't like somebody for their religion or for their background or where they came from or the color of their skin, obviously terrible, obviously wrong, doesn't make sense. It's such a ignorant, naive position to hold, completely unnuanced, right? But now, the word anti-Semitic just means anybody who criticizes Israel. And it doesn't even have to be criticizing Israel. It could be just criticizing one man, right? Remember how back in the COVID times, back in COVID, when Fauci said that if you criticize science, you're criticizing Anthony Fauci, right? I don't know if that's what he sounds like. It's been a long time. I am science. I am science. So if you criticize Anthony Fauci, you criticize science. Right now, if you criticize the leader of Israel, right? You criticize Bibi Netanyahu, now you're anti-Semitic, right? So you're anti-science if you criticize Fauci, and you're anti-Semitic if you criticize Netanyahu or even his decisions, right? And you see the theme there, right? If you criticize one person, they use the weapon of you criticizing an entire people. Oh, now you're a racist. Now you're a Nazi. Now you're anti-Semitic, which is obviously not true. I have no distaste for Jewish people. I grew up in a predominantly Jewish community until I was of a certain age. Nothing bad to say about Jewish people. In fact, I think they're very, generally, their communities and the way that they deal with each other is very positive in the U.S. The way that they do business with each other is impressive. Lots of good things to say. But I would say I don't like what Benjamin Netanyahu's doing. I don't like the absolute horrific acts that he's conducting in Palestine. I don't like the way that he is influencing our election or our foreign policy or our domestic policy or conducting surveillance or blackmail, allegedly. But I'm not anti-Semitic. But he'll call me that, so will the entire online community. If you come out of at least Zionists will come out and criticize you if you say anything bad about Benjamin Netanyahu, and all of a sudden you're a Nazi. But what seems to be a far more fair thing to say in today's world is that there is a anti-Christian sentiment happening. There is a act of terror happening at least once a quarter at a church, at a place of worship. And we're not allowed to say that there's anti-Christian sentiments around the country, anti-Christian terrorists around the country. But over and over and over again, we're seeing these types of attacks happen in the church. But how many times have you heard the word anti-Christian being thrown around? Who's really being prosecuted here? Is it or persecuted? Is it the Jewish people? Or is it the Christian people? The facts, the statistics within the U.S., right? And some people want to say, oh, well, there's been some attacks. Like, no, there's been 35 Christians shot in this country sitting in a church this year. 35. I think that number's up now that we actually have the death toll of this shooting. 35 plus. 0 shootings happened within Jewish synagogues. 0 in 2025. Who's being persecuted? Seems like people of Christian faith are actually the ones being attacked within this country. But yet the only thing you hear about is anti-Semitic, anti-Semitic, anti-Semitic. No, anti-Christian terrorism. That is what we need to be saying. And this tells you specifically, and even more interesting that it's not these foreign, the Islamic terrorists that are, and this is very real and very concerning, but there is a large amount of Islamic terrorists that have Al-Qaeda that have gained way into the United States. Allegedly, there's over 1,000 of them that are sitting waiting to do something horrible. But that's not what's happening even. Like I said, these are white males. The anti-Christian terrorism is happening domestically. And what does that tell you? That tells you that these people have been radicalized. And who would radicalize somebody against Christians? Well, if we look at the media, right, we look at the left, right? And I won't even say the left because apparently this guy, 2 Marines in 2 days is an interesting theme. Now, that's not to say that there's not Marines that are liberal, but it's just an interesting pattern that we're seeing here with these Christian shootings, these anti-Christian terrorist acts, is that they're happening domestically. Not by foreign terrorists coming here trying to cause a stir. That's not to say that that won't happen, and very soon if you ask some people, but by our own people that have been radicalized. So we'll finish this article. It says, flames and smoke poured out. 2 bodies were found during a search for debris. And said more victims could be found as searchers made their way through the entire church. One of the wounded people was in critical condition Sunday evening, and the 7 others were stable. Gosh. It says the motive is not yet clear. Investigators were searching Sanford's residence, but authorities did not say they found or provide any additional details about him, including whether he was a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, widely known as the Mormon Church. Sanford served in the Marines from 2004 through 2008, working as an automotive mechanic and vehicle recovery operator, according to military records obtained by the Detroit News. He was deployed to Iraq from August 2007 through March of 2008, so 6-month tour, and had the rank of sergeant. Very interesting. There you have it. Tragedy, horrible. And it shows you specifically what the answer is here, right? Especially when you see the hate that came after Charlie Kirk's shooting. Like, if you haven't realized that the Christian faith, what the Christian faith stands for, you haven't been paying attention over the last month. Because when one of the largest public Christian figures gets assassinated, what do we see? An outpouring of love, an outpouring of support, an outpouring of community. And not only that, but an outpouring of forgiveness, right? What did Erica Kirk quote from the Bible? She talked about how Jesus was on the cross and said, "Forgive them, Lord, for they know not what they do." She goes, he's just a kid. And what he did is horrible, right? Paraphrasing. But I forgive him. That's the power of Christianity. That's the power of what's in the Bible, right? That's the power of this community that can come together. And during times of horrific tragedy, what do? We're not flipping cars. We're showing support. We're showing love. And not only that, but showing forgiveness, right? Seems like something that maybe the people who are committing these acts should probably have pursued instead of these horrific things that they did instead.